Welcome to the Elokus channel. This is class number 8 in the third discourse, Vayichan Shom Yisroel. Um, yep, class number 8. Here we go. We're in the middle of chapter 10. I do want to dedicate this class. Number one, it's my grandfather's yahrzeit tonight, so I want to dedicate it for my grandfather, Rabbi Reuven ben Rabbi Zev HaKoyen. May this be to his aliyas neshama. For the elevation of his soul. Also, for his chus refuah shalema, for a dear friend, they add him a name to him, Chaim Shner Zalman, Ben Leah Miriam, may have a complete refuah shalema now. In the merit of the pure godly content that we're learning, spreading Hasidus, which brings Mashiach, may you have the light of Mashiach and the miracles of Mashiach bring about a full recovery. Okay. So yesterday, and then the last class in number 7, we were talking about how there is a fundamental difference between how we say that in levels of Ein Aroch, when we say that one thing is inconsequential or considered absolutely nothing in comparison to where it comes from above. There is a difference between when we say that regarding creation, that creation is Ein Aroch to the divine, versus when we are saying regarding the vessels of Atzilus, because the vessels of Atzilus are called Elokus, they are called divine. Although the manner, this is the idea that we were developing, and the manner in which they came about is in a way that has no strings attached to what was before. It's completely something new, because over here is where the concept of a gvul. Remember, he brought from the Avodas HaKodesh earlier in the discourse, from the teachings of the Avodas HaKodesh, an amazing thing that Hashem God has a power in the infinite, and God also has a power to produce in the finite. And then he says these words, V'hagvul hanimtza memenu tchila. The first demonstration of a limited force that emerges from God is the kelim, the spherois of Atzilus, the kelim, the vessels of Atzilus. So what do you see from here? That the vessels of Atzilus are called gevul. Although we learned, remember that these vessels that are kindness or all the other features, they are infinite in the world of Atzilus. There's infinite kindness. There's infinite compassion, all the other attributes. However, the very notion that they have, so we learned there's 2 elements to their finitude. Number one, that even though they are infinite in Atzilus, but when they extend into the lower realms, their influence is finite. But even more important is that the very notion that it is a definable energy, that is kindness and not discipline, or the power of discipline or strength, that's not kindness, that is a limitation. That is a definition. And as a result of these things being a definition, it's the power of gevul. And if it's gevul, if it's a limitation, it is considered absolutely nothing in comparison to its source higher, which is infinite. So in this case, the kelim of Atzilus and the creations are both Ein Aroch. They're both without a comparison to what is higher. Yet there is a fundamental difference between them. And that is that the lower worlds, the creations, are called creations, and the vessels of Atzilus are divine. So this is where we're struggling with. We're trying to characterize this. We're trying to get an understanding of what this means, that it is divine. So as we were learning yesterday, is the very fact that it becomes something in the sense that it is a particular definitive energy, that is the nature of the attributes, the kelim of Atzilus. However, it does not become a somebody. It doesn't become something that has a sense of beingness other than God, as opposed to the spheroids, the creations. They become not only something, but they become somebody. So there is an entity that's not God, or some consciousness that perceives itself independent from Hashem. So in the spheres of Atzilus, it's almost like God himself is taking a leap from his infinite expression to defining himself in a very specific power. This is the example we were giving. It's like a spark that breaks off from the fire. It's the same fire, but it's a separated spark. But it's a spark of the fire. It's not a new entity, as opposed to a being that becomes a somebody onto its own. It becomes a yesh. That's an interesting characterization. Bria, Yetzir, and Asiya, which means the creatures and powers in the lower three worlds, they are already something. They are already somebody. They're a yesh. The spheres of Atzilus, they are not a somebody. They're not b'pchenas yesh. They're still they are divine. So much so, remember that the 7 names of God are the names of the Kalim. So their identity is God, nothing other than Hashem. Yet they're brought into existence in a non-strings attached, which means not with a continuous flow to its source, as if it's something out of nowhere pops up. It's so amazing. It's something in that sense that it's separated in the sense that it's totally a total new phenomenon, and yet it's still Hashem. The consciousness is still God. The way he characterizes it, he says that be'etzem mehusam. This is an interesting word. Let's read it inside. Ma'ashenkin bekelim datzil. Again, this is in chapter 9. Hagam in the kelim of Atzilus. Hagam de hisavusam. Even though they're coming into being, b'pchinas ein aroich, is in a manner of in comparison to what is before, because before that there is no gevul. There's no limitation. There's no specific entity that is limited. Nevertheless, they are still divine. Vahainu, what does that mean? And this is an important idea. The ein aroich shalahem, this that we say they are not comparative to what is before, einam be'etzem mehusam, is not in who they are. Kiyem mashe hisavusam, it's only in their coming about. Who be'ein aroich is in a matter of utterly insignificant, in a distant, in a complete, if you might say, break away from what was before, not in the consciousness, but in the form of existence, that it's a limited entity. In their essence of being, they are in like their source, in the sense that what? And their root, what does that mean? The source of the Kalim is the, as we spoke earlier, the Oisiyos HaReshimu, the letters of the Reshimu. The letters of the Reshimu, the letters of the trace that was revealed through the Tzimtzum, that is Hashem. That is Hashem's, a trace of the Orein Sof. but it's Hashem, it's nothing other than God. So in this sense, the Kalim are still are the same as that. In essence, it's Elokus, it's divine. And if you say Shirish or Makar, the root of them is the Kav, even though it's not the direct root of the Kalim. And the Kav is a line of divinity. So that's what we mean over here, that they are Elokus. Yet, their form of existence is an inyan of Gevul. They are an element of limitation. But as we said earlier, it's God being limited. Not chas v'sholem, something else, like a creation. Now you're going to say, if it's God version limitation in a limited form versus God being unlimited, like all the levels preceding it, and we're still going to talk a little more about that. I'm sorry, to clarify that even the Oisiyos HaReshimu are still the koach of, it's still Ein Sof, it's still infinite. And now you have a phenomenon of limitation. So you might say, how can you say be'etzem husam, they didn't change? An essence of substance didn't change. Of course it changed. It's a whole new phenomenon. So therefore he adds in the parentheses over here, the hachilukim, and the differences that exist, b'madregis elokus gufa, the differences that exist in the levels of elokus, in the levels of divinity itself. Ein ze b'pchenas ein aroich is not considered the true meaning of the word ein aroch, to have no comparison. In other words, since there is one common thread in both these levels, all the levels higher than the Kalim of Atzilus, and the Kalim of Atzilus, they can claim, they all share the idea that they are Elokus, because again, there's no separate consciousness. So therefore, you can't say on it truly the concept of it being really Ein Aroch. So that's what we mean, b'mehusam. In their substance, they're still the same. Although in the form of how it comes about, there is a complete and an absolute separation and jump, if you might say, from what is before to what is after. Meaning there's no connecting dots. Other than the fact that what lands as that spark still retains the fact that it is of the fire. It is Hashem. Again, so all of this, so we're in a deep discussion over here, but all of this is to reconcile the concept that the Kalim of Atzilus are Yesh Maayon. They're considered something totally new. Now we understand it's Yesh Maayon. But at the same time, it's also Elokus. It's still divine. Now, in order to help us understand this subtlety, again, now this is all really part of a parenthesis. So we're going very deep over here into this discussion. And sometimes you have to realize that when you're in a parenthesis, you can understand the Maamor without necessarily having full clarity in this, because this is tough stuff. This is hard. But we're hopefully gonna clarify it as much as Hashem will help. We'll be able to understand. Not to help us understand this idea that there isn't really a true Ein Aroch, even though we are now descending into the finite from the infinite, which should really be considered a real Ein Aroch, incomparable, but yet it's not completely. So he is going to really trace a line from the Kalim of Atzilus to levels of the divine that are considered its source. Although those levels are not gevul, they're not limited, yet, and this is already gevul, this is limited, yet he's going to now show us that it's not a complete and absolute breakaway. And therefore, we don't say on it Ein Aroch. The real meaning of Ein Aroch. A creation is really Ein Aroch. But the Kalim of Atzilus and is because, as we'll see now, is not to be considered completely Ein Aroch. Now, I'm going to give a little bit of a little introduction. What he's going to do now is he's going to evaluate the relationship of this evolution process, how the Kalim of Atzilus, and that Kalim of Atzilus come into the vessels of the world of Atzilus, of the Spheros, when they come into formation, he's going to compare them to stages that precede them, which are on the way down. Now he's going to insert a new level over here that we didn't speak about. Till now we spoke about you got the Or Ein Sof, the infinite light. Then we have the Tzimtzum, the contraction. As a result of the contraction, the first thing that we spoke about, which is important to realize, is the Or Ein Sof gets reintroduced again and shines forth the Kav, which is, right, that line, the narrow thread of Or Ein Sof, which that Kav becomes the source of eventually the lights of Atzilus. But then the primary, and therefore the Kav is not so responsible for the Kalim. It's primarily responsible for the Or, for the light, because in Atzilus itself, the Spheros have Oiros and Kalim. So the Oiros are more derivatives from the Kav. The Kalim, we learned, its primary source, the source of the Kalim, is the Oisios Harishimo. These hidden traced letters, which they are a revelation of the Koach HaGvul of the Or Ein Sof, the power of God to be limited, the power of the Or Ein Sof to be limited. So that's what and then from this Oisi Rishima, remember we learned the Kav travels through these Oisi. As a result of that, the power of limitation affects the Kav. Although inherently the Kav is a reintroduction of infinite light, because it's going through the letters of the Rishimu, it kind of superimposes upon it limitation. And then, if you remember, through a collision of the direct light and the Orchoizer rebounding light, there is this collision which shoots off sparks, which somehow produces the Kalim. Okay? So according to this, you're going to go straight from the Oisis Rishimu down to the vessels of Atzilus. Right now, however, he's going to introduce another level because it doesn't immediately evolve into vessels of Atzilus. There is far more subtler levels that emerge first before we get to the spheres of Atzilus. Now, the spheres of Atzilus, the Kalim of Atzilus, as we said earlier, they are already visibly limited. So you don't come to a visible limitation immediately. What's the hidden level that he's going to bring, that he's going to insert now? And he's going to analyze the relationship of the vessels of Atzilus with this earlier stage. What is that? There is after the Kav goes through the Oisias HaRishima, the letters of the Rishimu, and begins to produce what we might say, Olamais Ein Sof, infinite worlds of infinity, until it produces what we call the world of Atzilus. So the world of Atzilus is not immediate. So for our discussion till now, because we were talking very general, we didn't mention it. But there are some stages in between. So the first stage is called Adam Kadmon, primordial man. Primordial man is a level where you have already a sketch of everything that will be. And in that sketch, so to speak, an abridged sketch or a concentrated sketch of everything that will later evolve. So over there is already all the spheres, all the attributes. However, in Adam Kadmon, the Kalim, the vessels, are very, very hidden. And we're gonna this way. Let's not get too worried about this now because we haven't explained much. But I want you to remember this. There is the beginnings of lights for sure. Adam Kadmon is a world with very intense light, far, far, far more intense than in the world of Atzilus. The light is far brighter. And precisely because of that, we're going to see there are vessels over there as well, but the vessels are not noticed. All the vessels, all the spheres in Adam Kadmon feel like one sphera, one attribute. They're all one. All the Kalim are, it's as if there's only one vessel. And even that vessel is hardly noticed. And over there, the Chesed and the Gevura and the Teferes is all completely unified, as if they're one. So, and then eventually these vessels begin to emerge as independent vessels. The next stage is going to be the world of Tohu, where the vessels become Nikudais, become points, and eventually these vessels evolve in Atzilus, where they become configurations. All out of this discussion we're going to have later in the discourse, but now we're just going to point out one point. The first trace of vessels, the first trace of Kalim is an Adam Kadmon. But the Arizal says, and here's an important a line that he's going to bring in a moment. Now, Arizal says that the vessels that there are in Adam Kadmon are so subtle. They are so subtle. They are called Sharshe Neshamos. They are called the root of the soul of the vessels of Atzilus. First of all, we don't even call it vessels, we call it soul, the soul of the vessels. And we can't even call it the soul of the vessels, we call it Sharshe Neshamas. It's the root of the souls of the vessels of that will later become the vessels of Atzilus. So it's very, very, very benign. However, we're going to see now in which he's going to say, now he's going to analyze how from these Sharshei Neshamas, where all the vessels are considered all part of one vessel, they're going eventually to differentiate and become specified, and each one is going to evolve into its own vessel. The vessels are going to formulate, they're going to develop, they're going to become more pronounced, become the vessels of Atzilus. So now his question is going to be the relationship of the vessels of Atzilus to the vessels of Adam Kadmon. And can we in any way, do we say Ein Aroch? Do we say that they are, is there no connection at all? Is it like the vessels of Atzilus are Yesh Me'ayin, totally new, so much new that you can't trace it to anything? Or if we're really, 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 really examining and looking very, 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 very carefully, can we see in the most subtle, in a very hidden way under the microscope, can we find already in this very lofty level of Adam Kadmon the substance of the vessels of Atzilus? And he's going to prove over here that the vessels really start already in Adam Kadmon. And that is going to further illustrate the idea that in the stages of Elokus, it's not so Ein Aroch. We're not, the vessels of Atzilus are not sourceless. They have a source. And therefore, the Adam Kadmon can't pretend when it looks down at Atzilus and say to Atzilus, who are you? I have no idea who you are. I don't even recognize you. Because Atzilus can look back to Adam Kadmon and say, the beginnings of me is in you. There is a subtle connection there. So what he's going to do is evaluate the relationship of the Kalim of Atzilus to the Kalim of Adam Kadmon. Then he's going to take it higher. He's going to evaluate the relationship of the vessels of Atzilus to the Oisias HaReshimu, to the letters of the Reshimu, which are before Adam Kadmon. The letters of the Reshimu was before any world was created. When the Orein Sof was hidden from the Tzimtzum, a trace of the Orein Sof, so this is way, way, way above and higher than Adam Kadmon, the Oisias Reshimu. So here there's also, and we call those Osios already also the source of the Kalim. So now we're going to evaluate to what degree do we say the Kalim, how do they relate to the Osios of the Reshimu? And then we're going to back up even higher. And we're going to say like this, the Oisias HaReshimu itself, the letters of the tracing itself, exist in two stages. The stage that we're talking about is after the Tzimtzum, and the Orein Sof has been removed, has been hidden, taken back into itself, and it's like a paper that has been erased, and then you see little tracings. That's the Oisias HaReshimu. But that's the Oisias HaReshimu after the Tzimtzum. Then he's going to question, but how about the Oisias HaReshimu, the letters of the Reshimu, before the Tzimtzum? When the Oisias HaReshimu were not even visible, because these letters were still included and embedded and one and carved out, we're going to see, in the Orein Sof itself. So now what we're going to have is we're going to ask the question as follows. What is the relationship of the vessels of Atzilus in its Ein Aroch, in its nothingness, to the Orein Sof itself? Literally the Orein Sof, the infinite light before the Tzimtzum. Let's call that stage A. B, the relationship of the vessels of Atzilus to the Oisias HaReshimu that are hidden in the Orein Sof, still in the Orein Sof, when the Orein Sof has not been dim yet, when the Orein Sof is still shining before the Tzimtzum, and the Oisias HaReshimu are swallowed up completely in the Orein Sof. Obviously they're in a much higher state then. What's the relationship with these Oisias HaReshimu to the eventual vessels of Atzilus? Stage number 3, C. The relationship of the vessels of Atzilus to the letters of the Reshimu after they're already pronounced, because the Orein Sof has been hidden, and these letters are already standing in a more expressed state. Next, stage D, when there is already the beginning of the tracing of a world, when Hashem is creating the first sketch of the worlds, which are Adam Kadmon, and over there you have Kalim. And obviously these Kalim are already much closer to the Kalim of Atzilus. What's the relationship of the Kalim of Atzilus to these to the Kalim of Adam Kadmon? This is where the analysis is going over here. So for those of you who are getting comfortable and saying this is all going nice and easy, let's get ready for some we're going to be climbing a little bit over here. So let's go. And I'm just giving you a little bit of the structure before. The point over here is, in every case, the Ein Aroch is going to grow bigger. So let's perhaps make a little sneak peek and go a little ahead. I'm just going to give you because today we won't have time to break it down. So let's just at least summarize. What he's going to say is like this. To the Or Ein Sof itself, for sure, the Kalim of Atzilus are completely, inherently, in every way, shape, and form, completely Ein Aroch. Completely Ein Aroch. Why? Because Or Ein Sof has no gevul, no limitation at all. And the vessels of Atzilus are limitation, and limitation to pure, not even a source of limitation. There's no limitation at all. It's completely Ein Aroch. Then, to stage B, to the Oisius Arashimu, when it is inside the Or Ein Sof, while the Or Ein Sof is still revealed, he's going to claim that on that level, it's also Ein Aroch. Because even though the Osius Rashimu, the letters of the tracings of the Rashimu, the power of God's limitation that is there, we might say is already we're speaking of limitation, there's already limitation. But since the limitation on this level is not in any way a power of limitation, what it is it's God's limitlessness, and because of his, and the limitlessness is still shining, and therefore the included in the limitlessness is the ability to limit. So the ability to limit is not in any way a limited form. It's nothing of limitation. It's just as limitless as the limitless light, because its very definition as a limiting power is that it's because of the limitlessness. You don't sense limitation there at all. And therefore, the vessels of Atzilus that are a limited power, it's also Ein Aroch. It's also, we can say on it, completely Ein Aroch, which means it's totally a stranger. You can't trace it. You can't in any way point out the DNA of the Spheros in the Koach HaGvul. That's while it's still in the Or Ein Sof before the Tzimtzum. However, here's where the turning point changes. Once the Or Ein Sof dims itself, and the letters of the Osius Rashimu, the letters of the Rashimu, become a standalone entity. They stand for themselves, not included in the infinite light. Here we're sensing already finiteness. Although it's still the power of the infinite, it's not, there's nothing finite, but it's God's power of limitation. And you're not sensing that much that his power to limit is one and the same of the limitlessness, because the limitlessness is not shining now. So what you're seeing over here is God's power. It's not yet a limited power, but it's his power to limit. Over here, there is already, you can speak of somewhat of a connection. When you come to the next level, when you talk about the Kalim of Adam Kadmon, here, he's going to show us there is real Kalim there already. And there is already a chesed, there is already gevura. These definitions exist. But why aren't they limited? We don't say Adam Kadmon is limited. Adam Kadmon is still part of the Or Ein Sof. Even the Kalim are part of the Or Ein Sof. The Kalim are not in a state of mitzius. They're not in a state of something. He's going to explain that that's not because of the vessels. That's because the oil is so bright that it's canceling the vessels. The vessels on their own, if the light would not be so bright, would be already something. but they're not sensed because of the light. And in Atzilus, when the lights are far dimmer, the vessels emerge, and therefore the limitation and the somethingness of the vessels come out. And therefore, even though from Adam Kadmon to Atzilus is still light years and light years away, but there's still somewhat of a resemblance and a connection. So this is an outline sketch. This is a little Adam Kadmon sketch, a little preview of the next 2 or 3 classes when we're going to break this down. And I hope this preview is helpful in then in the analysis that we're going to do Be'ezus Hashem tomorrow. Meanwhile, let Mashiach be here today.